Welcome back, weeders and weeboos, to the Jabbling Doge, where today, it's honestly been a long while, but I finally got back to making some Skylanders content. And that's because there's a question I've wanted to answer for quite a while in a video like this. What is the single most underrated Skylander in the entire history of the franchise? Well, that's a bold claim to try and make, especially for someone only like 80% qualified to answer it, because yes, I admit, I sort of lose track when it comes to Trap Team and beyond in terms of Skylanders. Not that I haven't played with those Skylanders, but for me, Spyro's Adventure, Giants and Swap Force were the ones I grew up with, played obsessively, and beat on Nightmare multiple times over, back to front, grabbing every collectible. Hell, I loved playing Re-Giants so much as a kid, I soloed Nightmare mode with Drobot, only to give myself an excuse to play through it again. Trap Team and Superchargers though, I only played later in retrospect, and I've only been through once, and I still haven't even gotten around to Imaginators to be honest. But these later games though, I gotta say, the quality of them suffered greatly, and yes, I am including Trap Team in that. I don't understand how it's a fan favourite, it was by far the least enjoyable game of the bunch for me. Unfortunately, as much as I'd love to delve into that kind of worms though, that's not what this video is about. This video is dedicated to the single most underrated Skylander in the entire franchise. A Skylander I consider to be one of the top 3 strongest Skylanders in its game, but a Skylander who only held the spotlight for one single game, being just as underwhelming as people mistook them to be in every other installment of the franchise. But who might it be? Perhaps it's a core Skylander that was overlooked in favour of the more flashy gimmick Skylanders when it released alongside them. Stuff like when you just get a normal Skylander released alongside Swappers and Trap Masters. Not a bad guess, but all I could think from my knowledge there would be something like Popthorn. And while Popthorn is a beast in Swap Force, and I would go as far as to say probably the best Skylander in that game, unfortunately that's also not really a secret. That guy's literally known as the Drobot of Swap Force, and for good reason. So, maybe instead this is a bit of a trick question then, and the answer is a specific combination of swappers. Well, don't get me wrong, Rubble Blade is a severely underrated combo. Most people avoid Rubble Rouser like the plague since he's a slow and sluggish basic brawler, but as a result miss that Rubble Rouser has some of the most ludicrously devastating melee DPS in the game, only held back by his poor mobility, which disappears the moment you give him skates. Not to mention, if you approach with a spin, you can immediately knock up and stun an enemy, leaving them open for a 3-hit combo, and Rubble Rouser's 3-hit combo ends with another knock-up, stunning the enemy again to hold them in a stun lock. That being said, that does feel like a bit of a cop-out to me, because I don't think the reason that people don't talk about this Skylander is because people tried them and missed their potential. More likely, it's just a combo most people never really tried or thought about much. I mean, it's not exactly 2 of the most popular swappers in the game, and if you didn't think to combine them in this specific way, top and bottom, you wouldn't really have ever played with this specific moveset. Well, what if it's a character that sucked in their initial game but later got buffed and snuck under the radar, since most people don't pay attention to that kind of thing? In fact, I was kind of curious while making this video if there's any information on the wikis of these characters about buffs they got in later games, and I'm actually genuinely not sure if it's recorded anywhere what the buffs are, because I've noticed some of them, but I certainly don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of all of them, especially because naturally you tend to play with the newer Skylanders in the newer games because you can't bring the newer Skylanders back to the older games. And so you're less likely to actually try replaying the older Skylanders in the newer games and seeing how they've changed. So that's not a bad idea, but I just struggle to find any buffs substantial enough to make much of a difference. Probably the best candidate for that would be Ninjini, as she was pretty underwhelming in Giants. Her sword attacks were really good, but they were nothing special, and her bottle was near useless. Meanwhile, her orb attack at least gave her an option for range damage, but the inconsistent targeting and pitifully underwhelming DPS massively held her back. Going into Swap Force though, the orb was massively buffed to still do low damage, but now stun and knock up enemies from a distance, as well as having much more consistent lock-on targeting. Having a relatively fast, ranged, safe stun, especially on a relatively slow sword fighter, was a massive upgrade for her. That being said, even with this significant upgrade, she still mostly just went from kinda bad to kinda good. Not really enough for the title of most underrated Skylander of all time. Okay then, are you just messing with me now? Is this just going to be a game of playing favorites? It's going to be one of your hot takes, Skylanders everyone hates that you actually really like, isn't it? Oh, I bet it's Sprocket. You would make it Sprocket, wouldn't you? Well, maybe I would, but I didn't. I do think Sprocket is underrated, and she is one of my favorite Skylanders added in Giants. Then again, that perhaps doesn't say much when basically every Skylander added in Giants was one of my favorites. Either way though, the point is, despite my love for this Skylander, I'm not delusional. I think Sprocket is really fun despite her sluggishness, but I can't lie, that turret build speed really does sting quite a bit. I do think that when you set up turrets strategically during downtime in fights, use mines as like pseudo projectiles for damage output, and rely on your melee bread and butter to rush down specific targets instead of getting yourself into messy situations by trying to control what your turrets and mines hit, which usually just doesn't work out in the end. If you do all that, I think she plays pretty good. Combined with the fact that her 3 melee combos are probably the most useful assortment of melee combo options on any character in the entire series, where AAA is a great burst kill option, AAB is a huge AoE that instantly clears hordes of weaker enemies like Chompies from all directions around her, including behind her simultaneously, and AAC is the optimal DPS option provided you can detonate all of the mines, but that's of course really difficult and is usually best used on huge stationary targets that can activate all 5 mines at once by just dropping them on top of them. Though it can also be used to clear out hordes if there's enough people all around you. As a result, I do think Sprocket is a decent Skylander when you play her right, but a lot of people kind of just want to button mash, and so they think that she's really bad. But even just saying that, that's the thing. She's decent at best. From trash to decent is certainly an upgrade, but probably not most underrated ever material. So am I overthinking this maybe? Could it perhaps be hidden in plain sight? Did you lie in your thumbnail, Double? It's Spyro, isn't it? No. YouTubers can't lie in their thumbnails. Come on, everyone knows that. But it would in fact be funny if it was Spyro. And credit where it's due, Spyro does fit the description pretty well. In fact, I might have to give him second place. Now what the hell is that all about? Doesn't Spyro, well, you know, suck? His fireballs deal abysmally low damage even when fully upgraded. They also expire extremely quickly and travel super slowly to the point where you almost use the fireball attack more like a sword than a projectile because the range on them is that awful. They fire very slowly, and while there are plenty of upgrades for them, they just suck. The fire shield does minimal damage and only at point blank range, kinda defeating the purpose of having a ranged attack. The triple fireball upgrade looks great until you discover that the 3 fireballs are programmed to not be allowed to hit the same target, meaning it's only triple damage if you can find 2 other adjacent and different enemies to hit, and most of the time it doesn't improve your DPS at all in single target situations. Only the explosive fireball upgrade does much here, because it does provide a slight DPS boost, only to the center fireball, not to the left and right ones. But once again, we just have too much focus on AoE damage here and absolutely 0 single target damage. And I mean, don't even get me started on the charge shot. You want me to leave myself open to attack, slow myself down, and stop dealing damage for multiple seconds just to fire off a single fireball that does less damage than a single swing from a basic melee character. Combine that with a very underwhelming and punishable ram attack, and not only having his 3rd move slot be eaten by a flying move which doesn't attack enemies, but the single most useless flight in the game because spamming the ram move is literally faster than just using the fly. Not even the fact that the ram move isn't as easily controllable as the flight is a great argument, because Spyro's flight is also really slippery, and genuinely the amount of control you have on the turning of your ram is about comparable to the amount of control you have while flying. And I mean, take that all into account and just what could possibly be being underrated about this character if every quality they have is so awful? It just seems like they have no good qualities. Even their soul gem upgrade is, well, decent sure, but very underwhelming. It's a body slam attack you can activate by tapping the ram attack while flying, which does, in fairness, finally do some decent damage. But have you seen the lag on this move? It is ridiculous. How could Spyro possibly be underrated when he's this terrible? Well, Because we're talking about the wrong Spyro here. I'm not talking about Fireball Spyro. I'm talking about Ibex's Horns Spyro, specifically in Spyro's Adventure. You see, when you take the ramming path, Spyro's ramming attack not only gets some much needed speed and damage boosts, but also, all importantly, a stun. Now, having a stun attached to such a quick move has some obvious value, but you'd expect it to be severely limited by the targets that are immune to stun often being the biggest and baddest in the game. Only, yeah, you might be surprised to find out, in Spyro's Adventure, there doesn't appear to be a single enemy in the entire game immune to stuns, aside from bosses. It doesn't matter how big the enemy is, you can just ram right into their face and end their life right there. Because, oh, did I mention? You can literally just spam this to infinite stun lock every enemy in the game. I'm not joking. This actually genuinely makes Spyro, otherwise one of the worst Skylanders in the entire series, despite being the originator of it, I would say the 4th strongest Skylander in the first game. He's still held back by his poor range and abysmally low DPS, and since he can't use his stuns as a crutch in a boss fight, I can't really call him top 3, but by God if he doesn't make the rest of the game a joke enough to deserve 4th place. That being said, I think I'll give one more clue before I just come out and say it. I've been referencing my top picks for strongest Spyro's Adventure Skylanders a couple times in this video so far, so I'll start revealing them to you to give you a bit of a hint. I think the strongest Skylander in the first game is obviously an uncontroversially Drobot. By the low standards of the first game, their DPS was through the roof, and so combining that with long range and the fastest flight in the game, alongside a bit of minor movement tech with hover mode, and he's an easy top pick. Stealth Elf comes second for her ungodly levels of DPS on such a speedy character, especially as this is before her front flip's mobility got nerfed in future games. In fact, people often like to argue that she's the best, but she's held back by being a melee-only character. I agree, she absolutely melts, but, I mean, try to do a no-hit in this game with Stealth Elf, and then try it with Drobot and see which one is easier. You'll quickly realize how much of a difference having range makes. I already mentioned that Spyro comes 4th for his powerful stun, and the list is rounded out by Double Trouble at 5th, since his Eldritch Beam may be simple, but it's got really good DPS, as well as being the only ranged attack in the game that not only locks onto targets for you, but still allows for full movement control for dodging attacks while dodging yourself. A huge and often overlooked advantage to have in this game, since moving to dodge attacks often screws up your aim with ranged characters. In fact, the whole reason when I was first playing this game as a kid that Gil Grunt was my go-to Skylander to do any difficult challenge in the game wasn't because Gil Grunt had crazy DPS or anything. His DPS is pretty underwhelming. It was mostly because, when using his water jetpack, he not only moved faster, but he wouldn't rotate. And so if I faced myself in the correct direction to shoot the enemies, and then use the water jetpack, I could simultaneously dodge and shoot without Gil Grunt turning around and messing up my shots. As a result, again, if we're going back to the no-hit standard, while Gil Grunt's DPS is still so terrible I probably wouldn't put him near the top, at the end of the day, if I was doing a no-hit run in Spyro's Adventure, I genuinely think I'd probably have an easier time doing it with Gil Grunt over Stealth Elf. That whole being able to shoot from a safe distance, all while not messing up your aim by having to dodge, you can do both simultaneously, it's a huge deal. So the fact that Double Trouble can do it, and he doesn't even have to, like, make sure he's facing the right direction first and, like, you know, make sure that he's still got water left in the jetpack. Instead, it's just you lock on the beam and you move. It's just really, really effective to have that. Not to mention, his Magic Bomb upgrade, when fully upgraded to allow you to do it 3 times in a row, has some ludicrous DPS by the standards of the first game. But you might have noticed I skipped one. That only leaves the number 3 spot. I believe that the single most underrated Skylander in the franchise's history is the one that I would call the 3rd strongest Skylander in the entire game in Spyro's Adventure. Are there any last-minute guesses?
It's Tornado.
Okay. So before you all scream at me, let me ask a couple questions of you first. So first of all, hands up if you've played Tornado before. Okay then, now keep your hand up if you played them specifically in Spyro's Adventure. Not Giants, not Swap Force, not, God forbid, Trap Team, Spyro's Adventure. Now keep your hand up if you bothered to fully upgrade him. Alright then. Now keep your hand up if in Spyro's Adventure you played him with the Shell Spin path, not the Tornado path. I imagine there's going to be a lot less of you now. And by the time I say this next thing, there's only going to be like 2 hands left. But keep your hand up if you played the X-Pack port. That's either the Xbox or PS3 version of the game, not the Wii version. For those of you who still have your hand up, you may scream at me now, but I'd venture to guess that's not a lot of you. I don't really blame anyone for burying this guy into obscurity because he really did get screwed so bad. If I'm not mistaken, I believe Warnado was part of the fourth and final wave of releases for the first game, which is already going to hurt his popularity. You weren't able to get him until months after the game already released, so that obviously reduces the chances that people get to play with him, because in a few months' time, maybe they don't care about the game anymore. But then on top of that, they made his base figure ludicrously underpowered, put everything that makes him good only onto one upgrade path, and severely gutted him into unplayability in every subsequent game after the first. I swear Warnado just gets slower and weaker every single game that passes. And it's not like he wasn't already gutted enough in Giants, he was already underwhelming in Giants, and somehow he just gets worse with every new installment. And as if that all wasn't bad enough, he's only good in the inferior ports of the game, not the original Wii version, which specifically for Spyro's Adventure is significantly better for those of you who didn't know, since the first game was always intended to be a Wii exclusive, and the ports were rushed out at the last minute when that no longer was going to pan out. Someone out there on the dev team must have absolutely despised poor Warnado's guts. Or, more likely I guess, they never even meant to make Warnado good in the first place, considering that only the buggier port of the game lets him reach the levels of power that he really deserves. So okay, let's take a step back for a second. Why is Warnado specifically in Spyro's Adventure, specifically on the Shell Spin path, specifically the X-Pec port of the game? Why is he so good? Well, how do I break this to you guys? You've been lied to your entire life. Stealth Elf isn't even close to the fastest Skylander in Spyro's Adventure. It's Warnado. No, your eyes do not deceive you. No, this isn't done through some evil editing tomfuckery. This is just how fast Warnado is when you play with the correct upgrade path on the correct version of the game. Yes, the Warnado in this footage is one with a max speed stat, both wearing the winged hat and with all speed-related heroic challenges complete, but so is the Stealth Elf he's being compared to, so this is an even comparison.
So he can do a couple of tricks. I mean, it's not like he can walk on water.
Hey, everybody!
Okay, but seriously though, being fast is good, obviously, but would it really compensate for all his other shortcomings if his range and his damage are still lacking? Well, no, but that's the thing. The other addition to this upgrade path, the mini Warnados and your Tornadoes, fix both Warnado's lack of DPS and his range problem, as firing these things out is a high DPS ranged attack that also bounces off of walls to hit multiple times, and you can even perform a slam attack to fire them all off at once for huge burst damage as well as AoE damage, and the slam itself also has a hitbox which deals 40 damage on impact, which might not sound like a lot, but again, damage numbers were really low in the first game. Yes, Warnado's DPS is poor if you just spam Shell Spin, but that's not how you actually play him. Actually, the main reason I find Warnado so fun is I think that this Skylander is honestly the Skylander with the best balance between the primary, secondary, and tertiary attack. I mean, let's be real, most Skylanders effectively have 2 attacks, some even effectively 1. You know it, we all know it, there are Skylanders where you play them and you mash the button, and you don't care about the other 2 buttons, you just mash the 1 button that's good. And hey, maybe if you change upgrade path, the button you're pressing changes, but it still doesn't change the fact that whichever button is the one you want to press is the only button you ever press. Now in fairness, that's for the worst of the worst. Most Skylanders, I think, are in the middle, and usually they have a problem where, yeah, if you're using the primary attack, you never want to use the secondary attack, and vice versa. If you're using the secondary attack, you never want to use the primary attack. But at the very least, the tertiary attack, no matter which path you pick, is usually decent. Just not as good as whatever your best attack is. I really do think it is shockingly rare for them to make a character where all 3 moves really feel about equally valuable. And I would genuinely say that Warnado is the only character where they manage that balance effectively, because achieving optimum DPS with Warnado actually does require you to use all 3 of his moves on top of using most of his different combo inputs. His best DPS options come from the mini Warnados inside the tornado, whether it be through slams or firing each one off individually. But the thing is, you only get 6 of them, and to refresh them you need to go out and back into the tornado form. And it's not really efficient to just keep spamming the tornado button to keep refreshing them. And so that encourages you in the downtime in which you're not using tornado form to switch back to your original 2 attacks, your shell spin and your tornado. The fact that shell spin is also your mobility tool means it's also used for dodging. And of course, both firing off the mini Warnados individually as well as using the slam to fire them all off can be more effective in the right situation. Typically you would rather do the slam, but of course since it's slow and laggy, it leaves you open. Not to mention, if the enemies are further away because of the inaccuracy of just doing a slam, you're less likely to actually get more damage unless it's a close quarter space. So there's good reason both to fire them off one by one and also to do the slam attack. Not to mention, I already said, so long as you can get close or use it in a close quarter space, the slam attack is the best DPS you can get, but you need to find a way to use it without leaving yourself open. And that's where the tornadoes come in, because while their DPS is technically not all that impressive, the reason why tornadoes have such underwhelming DPS is largely because of the fact that they aren't really intended to be a main damage option. They lose a lot of DPS because of the fact that these things are stuns. Unfortunately not ones that work quite as intended against larger enemies, but still, they are stuns that can affect most enemies in the game, completely interrupting their attacks and taking them out of the fight for a moment. Which is still useful, because oftentimes when you're trying to get a big slam off on a big enemy, the main thing that stops you is other smaller enemies crowding around the big enemy that will hit you and interrupt your attack while you're like charging up for the slam. And so catching them in a tornado and then going for the slam gives you way more opportunities to use the slam to do optimum DPS. Not to mention that the tornado attack itself, while relatively slow still, is very backloaded in the lag. The startup lag to use the move is almost non-existent, it's the end lag that really hurts. So that means it feels really good to use this move immediately after using another move. As a result, this move is best used usually immediately after a shell spin or just before exiting tornado mode. So typically your gameplay loop as Warnado is at least a little bit more complicated than for most of the Skylanders. I mean, even taking a fan favorite like Stealth Elf, I really don't mean to blaspheme against her because I do like her, but at the end of the day, let's be reasonable. You use the third attack just to get around faster, you basically use it as a sprint, you don't really use it in combat, and you don't use the second attack at all. You run at the enemies and you mash the A button. That's your game plan as Stealth Elf. Mash the front flip button to get there faster, and then mash the melee button to deal damage. Whereas for Warnado, there's a little bit more going on. Because it's so ludicrously fast, you want to be shell spinning everywhere. You'll never walk again when you touch this character. You'll want to shell spin to every location. So that means, first of all, that you have to get used to the different kind of movement that employs, but then on top of that, you then have to steer that movement in the correct direction for engagements, cancel those shell spins into tornadoes, and then immediately go into tornado form. In tornado form, assess, given the context of the situation, whether you want to go for a slam or individually fire off your mini Warnados. Potentially, if there's another target to go for, fire off a tornado again before leaving tornado form, or before then dodging whatever incoming attacks are appearing, or approaching whatever enemy you want to go for next with your next shell spin, hopefully landing a quick hit on the way in or out, or before then repeating the cycle. There's a lot more judgment calls, a lot more this can change depending on the situation, and a lot more variety in the move usage of Warnado. You know, we don't really talk about skill expression much when it comes to Skylanders, because let's be real, there isn't a whole lot of it in Skylanders usually, but I think that's a real shame. I think that Warnado is kind of proof of potential that there could be a more skill expressive character in a game like this, and they could be really, really fun. I get that the button mashing characters that just melt super fast are fun and satisfying, but at the end of the day, I kind of would like more characters like this. Either way, I hope I made my point, and I hope some of you are a bit more interested in giving Warnado a chance. Though then again, some of you might even struggle to have the opportunity, considering again, unfortunately it's only the XSpec versions of the game where you're allowed to reach these speeds on Warnado. In fairness, some of what I said is true in all versions of the game. Certainly a lot of what I was just saying about how all 3 of his moves feel effective in his moveset, and I do feel like he feels like one of the most skill-expressive Skylanders in the game, I do think that's true no matter what version you play. But it just doesn't feel right when he's so slow in all the other versions. It feels so much better when he can move so much more quickly around the battlefield. Not to mention, oh god, I didn't even get into it, but because Warnado's clearly not supposed to be a fast character, it's kind of just a small little bonus, but Warnado's tanky as hell. He's got a very high armor stat and one of the highest HP pools in the entire game in terms of Spyro's adventure standards. And when you tap that onto a character that's already a very small target and very fast and hard to hit, that also has so many options for so many different attacks that can also disable the enemy's own attacks and also deal with them from a safe distance, yeah, you can see why I think that Warnado genuinely deserves to be in the top 3 strongest characters in this game, despite the fact that I do acknowledge that most of the other top characters in this game have something that makes their damage output ludicrous. Meanwhile, Warnado definitely doesn't have that. Hell, you might have even thought he would be vulnerable to large targets, but not necessarily. While he can't stun them with tornadoes, he can still interrupt their animations. Essentially, when the tornado hits them, if they're in the middle of doing an animation for attack, it does reset the animation. So although it's not an explicit stun, you can still sort of interrupt a move they were about to do with the tornado, even if they're too big to be stunned by it. Either way, I think that'll do it for this video. I mean, I don't think there's another underrated Skylander I'm forgetting about. Is there? There couldn't possibly be another Skylander that gets to do some absolutely dumb broken shit as a result of a bug in the XPEC port of the game, right?
Oh Christ, Whamshell, what are you doing?
Yeah, so Whamshell's AAB 3-hit melee combo, doesn't deal knockback to large targets because they're too big. And in the normal versions of the game, there's a limit to how fast it can hit them over and over. But in the XPEC ports of the game, it both doesn't deal knockback, but also deals the damage every single frame the enemy is touching the mace. So this combo literally hits them 30 times a second. Oh god. Okay, in all seriousness, this is just a little bonus I thought I'd throw in there since it's kind of tangentially related to everything I've been covering in this video. It doesn't really make Whamshell busted per se, because it's kind of the only thing he's got going for him. And again, it only works on targets that are big enough to not take knockback. Enemies small enough to take knockback when they're hit by this move get knocked out of the hitbox immediately, so it doesn't just insta-kill them. Though I suppose you could still theoretically like push them up against a wall and see if that could work. Certainly a really cool trick, but without that gimmick, kind of still a weak character, and that gimmick won't work on everything. With all that said, thank you for watching. Tell me about your underrated Skylanders below, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.